He's coming to the front, and ladies and gentlemen, in this context, actually, I would not need to introduce Mike Saylor to anybody here. But we've just heard from Scott, if you're not innovative, you're falling behind. In fact, if I remember correctly what you said last year, you actually said adjust or die. It's saying a similar thing, a bit more drastic. Hi, it's wonderful that you can be here with us today. Absolutely fantastic. Your new book, The Mobile Wave, actually sort of reiterates a couple of the things that you shared with us last year. I remember that you were talking about the intelligent wallet, and I've been thinking about you every time that I've used my iPhone for other reasons than actually using the phone. And you've talked about the destruction of paper. Well, I'm sorry to say, sir, there's some doubts about technology, and I hope that your iPad will work properly. I've already seen a colleague of mine struggle with a lot of difficulty when her iPad didn't want to work, and she didn't have a backup there. So, Mike, we are just looking forward how you're going to ride the wave and how you're going to ride with us. Thank you so much. Applause.
Thanks for coming here. Can I have a show of hands? How many people were in my keynote this morning? So, let's see, some. Interesting. So, I guess for those of you who weren't in the keynote, I'd like to cover some of the topics, but for those of you who were in the keynote, I'll try to make some points that are more relevant to marketing and to social media. And we'll see if we can't thread the needle. First of all, hope you got a copy. Did we give out a copy of my book to everybody here? You know, if you didn't, then you'll probably get one at some point. I wrote The Mobile Wave primarily because over the past 12 months, I think that this entire movement has taken on even a new degree of significance. There's a saying in the tech business, you know, if you're 2 years early, you know, that's just as bad as being 2 years too late. And we've been working on mobile technology for about 3 years, and I tend to think that I'm late, but oftentimes it turns out that just about the point that I decided that I've lost interest in the technique or in the technology, everybody else has gotten very interested in it. And that's actually, I think, what's going on right here, which is the mobile wave is breaking into just about every part of the economy. And so I thought it would be worthwhile to revisit the entire subject. What's exciting to be said about this? Well, 2012 is really the beginning of a transformational era. I saw some statistics that were pretty amazing to me. One is Apple computers, 83% of the wealth generation in the entire S&P 500 index in a 12-month time period, over the last 12 months. I think that's a shocker. If you look at the mobile wave, it's pretty clear to me, and I think to a lot of people, Apple is the leader in the mobile wave, Google is following as the number 2, and Microsoft is falling behind and may in fact be a no-show on the mobile wave. When I think about what this really means, right, in the book I had the chance to actually, sorry? Okay, the lights are here? Okay, thank you. Okay, so in the book I had the chance to do some research, and there's about 50 pages of footnotes in it, but the interesting observation is it's restructuring about 50% of the entire economy right now. So about half of everything is being restructured by mobile software running on iPads and iPhones and smartphones in general. And the book covers a lot of different areas of it. The most fascinating things we're seeing, and this is not new, so I'm going to cover this quickly, is 3-year-olds playing music on iPads, 80 and 90-year-olds reading. And the amazing statistic here is that the elderly actually read books 3 times faster on an iPad. Right? And so what's revolutionary, I think, is that with this particular wave, we're seeing this impact 5 billion people instead of 500 million people. The internet was just 500 million. It's impacting people about 150 hours a week instead of 15 hours a week, so that's another factor of 10. and it's 10 times easier to use. So it's the first technology you see that is appealing to generations that traditionally resist technology. The world in general agrees with my first assertion here, that 5 billion smartphones by 2015. I don't think the world actually has embraced my second assertion, which is to be 5 billion, if not iPads, then tablet computers. Right now, I wrote iPad because there really isn't a competitor yet, but under the best of circumstances, you're looking at probably 5 billion tablets that are iPads or iPad equivalents. And I think this is going to happen within the next 10 years. And that's not priced into Apple stock. That's probably not priced into anybody's economic calculations. Apple beat Wall Street estimates in 29 of the past 30 quarters. So that means everybody in the world has underestimated Apple for the past 30 quarters, right? Which is a pretty phenomenal run. I think they're still underestimating them because I don't think anybody's cranked in what happens if you sell 1 billion tablet computers in a year. Right? Already, as a consumer device, if you count units, the iPad's the most successful consumer device in the history of the world. And they're about to hit 100 million units, and there isn't an effective competitor yet. And I think they're limited only by the rate at which component manufacturers can manufacture this thing, even still. It's fascinating observation. 10 years ago, we talked on our phone, right? And then the killer app was SMS, and it became email. And now we actually see in the smartphone world, people using their phones 77 minutes for apps and 12 minutes for calls. So you've actually seen an inversion. This is a fascinating thing, I think, to a lot of us. It's driving a couple of dynamics. One, of course, is the phone went from being a commodity device to being a specialty device. The selling prices went from $50 a phone to $500 a phone. And your monthly phone bill is going to double or triple or maybe continue to go up. In fact, the amount of money everybody spends on a mobile device is presumably going to march forward month by month and year by year for the next decade. If I can use my phone to send email, I'll pay a bit more money. And if I can BBM on my phone, I'll pay a bit more money still. And if I can schedule a table or get an airline ticket, I'll pay more. But what happens when I can use my phone to get medical help or skip lines or enter the country, or the phone actually has my Visa on it? I think that as the apps get more valuable, the value of the phone gets higher. The devices benefit. So all the device manufacturers like Apple are winners. But also I think the people who provide network services are also going to be beneficiaries of this. And a great example is maps. And maps were really the domain of National Geographic and Rand McNally up until not too long ago. On an iPad, right, you can get streets, traffic, satellite views, and street view from Google Maps. There's 150 million mobile users of Google Maps. 150 million. And that's presumably up from what? I mean, nothing 5 years ago. So 0 to 150 million is amazing. The other amazing thing is if we looked at the amount of information in that map, it'd fill up this entire room. The other amazing thing is that anybody that didn't actually embrace this, which is a big data-centric software view for maps, is pretty much irrelevant to the mapping business. And they become irrelevant in 5 years. So, you have an example of the mobile wave hits the map industry and obliterates every asset in the business within 5 years, transforms the entire thing. The other takeaway from this, though, which I used to make my point, is I just can't imagine an educated person not wanting an iPad if you actually need maps, right? Nobody wants that. Why would you not want that if you had 500 million pages worth of information on maps? And given the fact that maps are integral to our life, if you buy a house, rent an apartment, if you're going to travel anywhere, who doesn't want to use Street View to figure out where you're going? If you're a bank and you've got mortgages that are going bad, you can actually link your mortgage data into Street View, and then you can look at the facade of every building where the rent's not being paid, or where the mortgage payment wasn't paid. You can look at every street corner where the average selling price of houses is going down or going up. It has impact on all sorts of other ancillary industries, and you don't really want to use street view or satellite views so much on smartphones, but when they get to tablet computers, they just become so much richer. And so this is actually the basis of my observation, that I just think we're going to a world where every literate person has got a tablet computer, because every literate person has got to get somewhere at some point. My other point, though, is this is actually one of the reasons Google is not blown out of the market. I think Microsoft, Nokia and RIM and Motorola all got blown out of the market. Microsoft is dangerously on the edge of being blown out of the mobile market. Google is clinging into the market, and one of the reasons they're able to actually cling to the market has been Maps. And you notice in the last competitive announcement, Apple announced they're going to bring out their own Maps, because Maps are actually a major battleground between the two for supremacy. And this has been an extraordinary source of strength for Google, which 5 years ago wasn't in the business at all, right? The environmentalist in me just loves this picture. 4 billion trees cut down per year. I'm guessing that we're just maybe we're at the peak. When we look back in history, we'll look to somewhere between 2008, 2010, whatever, is the peak of killing trees. I'll be glad to see this done. But you can see two things. One is there's just no way this can continue, because no one wants it to continue. And just about everything with paper in it is an inferior product now. Like that, the map with a 20-pound, atlas is a joke compared to Google Maps on an iPad. And similarly, it's happening everywhere in every market. But the other interesting observation for a marketing person is ad revenues are down 50%, 53% over the decade in the news business. And that wasn't inevitable. That's actually an indictment of the technology savvy of the people in that industry. They allowed that ad revenue to bleed out of their industry into the industry that Google and the business that Google's running or Facebook is running or other players are running, because they did not invest fast enough to convert their product into a software service. The whole point of the mobile wave is you have to think like a software company. You have to reimagine your product, and you have to sprinkle some magic on it. And if you think about a conventional product or service just running on a mobile device, it's going to be flat and uninspired, and the revenues are going to head south. So a newspaper that simply runs on an iPad might keep you in business for a while, but your revenue is going to shrink. You have to actually reconceptualize a newspaper and add value, either by driving massive scale. Right? At some point, you could have a 500 million person subscription newspaper, and they don't have that opportunity as long as they're capacity bound on tablet shipments, or you have to put a lot more value into the paper in order to hold your revenues. If you can't do either of those things, then your revenues shrink. $230 million a year in raw materials just to run the New York Times. The New York Times has 2 million in circulation. So 10 years ago, nobody cared. Now, when you look at the New York Times on an iPad, and then I put that statistic next to it, you just can't help but just read that as $230 million of waste per year because people are stuck in the old way. I just can't see that continuing much longer either. It seems to me like there's going to be a war on that $230 million in waste, and all that money is going to be diverted to something else. And so the question is, what's the something else? 2.2 million new books every year. What's fascinating about that is I did a calculation. I was just at the back of the envelope. I said, well, so if you print 2.2 million books a year and each book costs $10, then that's $22 million a year. So by the time you calculate that, or you maybe put out 50,000, if you do a 50,000 book run for each copy, it ends up costing $2 or $3 trillion a year to distribute the new books. And I thought, that can't be right. And I thought, well, yeah, it is right. because, of course, every bookstore doesn't have 2 million new books a year. So the point is, you just can't physically distribute the amount of information that's being generated by the society anymore with any conventional mechanical means. The only way you can hope to maintain an inventory of all the books or distribute all the information being created is via electronic means. So this has got to go away. The typical bookstore now is kind of a joke, right? I mean, it can presumably stock 20,000 new books a year, and it's, you know, you're looking at 1%, a thimbleful of humanity's creation is being distributed via any conventional way. The mobile wave has put all 2.2 million books in everybody's hands instantly for no cost. And you look at that, you can see it's inevitable, right? Bookstores are going to go to zero. You can also see, and this is painful and nostalgic, but the library is going to go to zero. Nobody wants to admit this, but you know, there's a fascinating inflection point in technology where your asset becomes your liability or your liability becomes your asset. The best way to think of it is I'm rolling a rock uphill, and for 20 years it's a liability and I hate that rock. I get to the top of the hill and I tip by 2 inches, and the heavier the rock is, the more likely it is to roll downhill. And then that liability becomes an asset. It just flips. Gravity changed direction. In this case, libraries were an asset to every community they were in for 100 years. They're now a liability. They're not an asset. It costs you $22 billion a year to maintain them. There are 103,000 libraries in America. They're just sucking up space, and they're sucking up real estate. And as I just showed, right, every library can't afford to stock the 2 million new books, right? It would cost you $22 million a year to have one copy of every new book in a library. So at this point, they're just pleasant places to go read. And even then, given a choice, everybody would rather read in their own living room than read in the library. So while the world hasn't quite come to terms with this, it just seems to me that over the next decade, there's going to be a wholesale dismantling of every library, because an 8-year-old that shows up in first grade at Harvard Prep School is going to have more and better information on their tablet computer than the entire Harvard University system would be able to provide them. If you showed up at the Library of Congress and I gave it to you, it wouldn't be as good as holding a $500 tablet. And so at that point, someone's just going to say, why do we do this, right? And there's a lot of inertia here. We still have governments, by the way, that are funding to the tune of hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. They're funding the creation of libraries. But if they stopped and thought about it, they'd realize that this is just throwing good money after bad. This is HBO Go. In the last 9 months, I haven't picked up a remote control, and I think that the remote controls are headed for the end, and I think that the entire television and movie industry is going to on demand, and especially given the fact that iPads and iPhones now integrate via Apple TV and AirPlay, it's looking increasingly likely that people are going to watch these things interactively. How many people have watched this movie Game of Thrones, or actually the television show Game of Thrones? It's like it's a sleeper hit on HBO. It became really huge. And one thing they did is they distributed it via an iPad, and then they built interactive content into it. So you're watching the show, and it's a complicated miniseries. So you can stop it. It'll show you a map. It'll show you a lineage. It'll show you an interview with the actor. It'll actually show you photo albums of the wardrobe of the actors. It has a background of the director. It even shows you the author. And so it's a fascinating multidimensional experience that they created. And I remember just seeing this very interesting update on my Apple. You know, it said HBO Go is updated, and I clicked on it, and it said, this update is necessary to support all the new interactive features of Game of Thrones. And I thought, since when did a movie network or an entertainment network have to ship software updates to their customers as part of their business? And it's indicative of the fact that we're now at this tipping point where you're maybe a software company as well as an entertainment company. And of course, this is the beginning of a trend, but I think this is going to accelerate. It's not going to get less. Right? And here you see the same thing, which is I think it's we're getting to the point where you can start to predict the slow grinding demise of game boxes, because there's 67 million Xbox 360s, and Microsoft's been working on that for a decade. There's 200 million active users of Angry Birds, which is a downloadable program. So this entire industry is also under onslaught as it converts from hardware to software. You know, I've always been excited about keys. These are real keys. Mercedes-Benz has got a key, and Zipcar's got a key. They don't quite do everything yet, but they'll open your door. And so if someone can actually ship a car key that opens your car door, we can't be far away from sending it to your friends, or shipping a house key. I mean, certainly it seems like houses aren't so complicated as cars, but we can see the advent of the software key. It's coming. And, of course, there's another statistic in the book. People spend 45 minutes in lines. I just think, you know, if you want a killer application and you're a marketer, the killer application is any mobile app that lets your customer not stand in a line, right? So banks make you stand in line. If I got to go to an ATM to get cash, the killer app is I don't have to go to the ATM anymore. Just load the cash on my phone. If I have to stand in an airport line for 60 minutes or 30 minutes to clear custom, the killer app is put my passport or my visa on my phone and zip through in 1 minute. Anytime you can actually put a mobile app with something that queue jumps, I think that you unleash incredible power. If that is true statistic, and that seems to be true based on our research, it's amazing. Even, what does it matter if it was 15 minutes? Multiply 15 minutes times 5 billion. Right? You got 1 billion hours a day, 1 billion hours a day of wasted time, 360 billion hours a year. Right? Value your time at anything, and then ask the question, how many of those queues are vulnerable? And I would say most of them are vulnerable. I mean, there are some queues, I guess queues where the bottleneck is a legitimate capacity constraint, maybe they're going to stick around. But so many of the queues that have to do with validating your identity or authorizing something or sorting something, those queues can go away. And there's just there's an incredible amount of energy going to that. If you look at Amazon's financial results, the thing that's striking to me is that if you look at how much money they spent on warehouses, like in the past 12 months, and the numbers are like $3, $4, $5, $6, $8 billion, right? Billions and billions of dollars of warehouses. And at the end of the day, a warehouse is just a big sort machine. And so why do they want to build all these warehouses? They're building the infrastructure to basically sort stuff based upon a machine instruction coming off of a smartphone and then drop ship it directly to you. One of our customers, Tesco, released this app where you can go and scan items and they would put it in a basket and ship it to your house. So the whole idea was pick what you want and skip the queue. The infrastructure that lets people eliminate queues is so incredibly appealing. I think that this is going to continue to be a driver everywhere. I talked about queuing, but I think the other real killer app right now, the next 36 months, I think are going to be characterized by this massive shift to mobile identity. We believe it so much we created a product for mobile identity. But what I mean by that is if I steal your passport, I can use it for a decade. And if I steal your driver's license, I can use it. And if I walk into a hotel and I flash a passport, they don't scan it to figure out whether it's been revoked or counterfeited or stolen. There's 1 million organizations with obsolete identity. There's $220 billion of identity theft a year. You can, I think, eliminate some large portion, if not 99%, 90%. More than 50%. I think 90%, 80 to 90% of this stuff can be obliterated if you create mobile credentials, because mobile credentials are theft-proof. You can't counterfeit them. You can't duplicate them. You can't tamper with them. You get a perfect audit trail of when they're used, how they're used. You can revoke them, and then you can do multi-factor authentication with them. And if you want to see some of that, you should see the demonstration of Usher Pro. We should show one because it's amazing. But $221 billion is $221 times $1 billion per year. And so, not to belabor the obvious, but if a smartphone costs $220, you can give away 1 billion of them per year just based upon obliterating this. And this is just one thing. So the theme of the mobile wave is there's so much energy being squandered in the economy due to inefficiencies which we can actually eliminate or alleviate or interrupt with mobile technology, that as we start to do that in a material fashion, we're going to create this incredible avalanche of adoption. And here, if you ever walk into a bar and you see a stack of 100 credit cards left behind the bar by drunk people that left last night, then you know what I'm talking about. All you got to do is pick up 10 of them, walk down the street, and start spending away. This is an incredible drain on the society. And again, a great marketing idea, right? A great marketing idea is create a mobile app for mobile identity and give it to your customers so that they don't get ripped off or so they don't have to wait in line. Most of the frustrations that customers have are because, try to call your bank and ask them to transfer, $10,000 to a friend of yours over the phone. See what happens. Right? I've been trying to transfer money to a friend of mine. It's taken me 5 days so far. 5 days of back and forth. It's like an email, IBAN codes, account codes, confirmations. People get the codes wrong. Like something as simple in our society as doing this is so stinking hard to do. It's so hard to do these things. If you get true mobile identity, you can reduce something that takes 5 days to 5 minutes. PayPal made it 5 minutes, so they got 100 million users. What if you make it 5 seconds? This is an embarrassing statistic. I think cash is going to go away. I really do believe. I think 95% of it should go away. When it does go away, we don't need 2.5 million ATMs, right? So that's an example of an asset becomes a liability, unless they come up with something else to do with an ATM, because dispensing cash is like not long with us. There are 367,000 robberies in the U.S. in 2010, and if you calculate the cost to society of that, and then you ask the question, do you want to put your cash on a mobile phone? The answer is, why wouldn't you do it just to avoid the 367,000 robberies? Right? Maybe that's the only app you need right there. No one has an incentive to rob you if you have no cash in your pocket. You can't steal my phone and you just lead the police to wherever you are. It's the stupidest thing in the world, right? So I think this is incredibly powerful dynamic. You guys are in a social media conference, so I'm not going to dwell on this except to say this network keeps getting more powerful and it keeps getting richer and the data model keeps getting richer. We've created a product, Wisdom Professional, that actually plugs into this to be the universal market intelligence app. You'll probably get a chance to see it at some point. It's just an awesome thing that you can sit and scan through any of 10 million or 20 million different brands and trace it. We basically trace 13 million people to 135,000 cities. Against 40 million different pages or brands already, and that's just in the first 6 months of rolling out the product, and it's getting richer as time goes on. I think medical is another area where we're going to see a massive transformation. We generate 12.4 billion pages of paper every year for medical information. There's massive fraud in this industry. You can call on a prescription to a pharmacy and they can't tell whether you're a doctor or not. You can call on your own prescriptions if you want. And you can take your brother's United Healthcare card and go to any doctor and you can use it to get medical treatment. Heck, you can take your brother's United Healthcare card and Xerox it 200 times and use it in 200 doctors' offices simultaneously. They don't have a way to track it. Right? So if you look at the issue of medical care inefficiency, Medicare fraud, on one hand you've got massive fraud issues. On the other hand, people are getting x-rayed multiple times in their life for no reason because they just can't trace the x-rays. I mean, just about everybody's had the experience of going to a dentist and getting another set of x-rays because their current set of x-rays are somewhere else. X-rays on an iPad is a killer application. Right? Without x-rays on an iPad, you need a radiologist in every single hospital in the world. Putting a radiologist in every hospital in the world to read your x-rays, in an urgent fashion is a very expensive exercise. What if you didn't need that? What if all you needed was a mobile phone tower within 30 miles of anybody with an X-ray machine, and then you could have one radiologist that could read, 500 people's X-rays? It changes the quality of care. It changes the cost of care. It changes the urgency of care. It changes people's thoughts about this. This entire industry is going to go a totally different direction in time, including medical sensors and medical service centers. This is going to grow, right? And the most optimistic thing you could say about this is there's 5 billion people at the bottom of the social and economic ladder, and they're suffering right now, and we have a chance to actually dramatically change their quality of life by allowing them to skip all of the infrastructure investments that were made in Europe and the United States and other parts of the developed world over the past 100 years. Instead of like tromping for 30 miles to a small clinic, right? Let the clinician come to you, or let the application come to you. Education is another great example. We spend $2 trillion a year on education, $2 trillion. And I think, again, this is maybe heretical, I think 90% of it is an utter waste of money. $1.8 trillion of human energy. In 1850, 67% of the gross national product of the United States was spent on growing food. And today the number is 1.8%. 65% of all the energy in the society was spent to not starve. People thought, well, we eliminate all these jobs, what are we going to do? Well, we do whatever you guys do, right? I mean, all the things that were created since we stopped trying to not starve with 2/3 of our time, that's a massive redeployment of energy. That's responsible for everything that we like about our lives today, I think. And you can't imagine going back to having 66% of the economy, working in a farm. Education is the next, it's a 19th century service. We operate education in the world the same way today that we did in 1850 or 1950. It's so grossly expensive, and yet we see like this shimmering of opportunity and hope here. Things like Khan Academy. This guy Khan created 1,500 snippets of education, uploaded them. He gets 4.5 million users a month. Okay, so I'm not saying that they're actually using it as intensely as sitting in a schoolhouse full time, but what if they're using it 1/10 as intensely? And what if we got one guy teaching 450,000 people by himself? Right? And by the way, we've only got 60 million iPads. Remember my forecast, 5 billion iPads. We're going to have 100x as much interactive tablets. The best device for learning anything in the history of the world is an interactive tablet. 3-year-olds learn music on an interactive iPad. Best device in the world. A 6-year-old can learn any of 100 languages for free off of an interactive iPad. So what happens when that number increases by a factor of 10 or 100? What if it was 100, right? What about the spectacle of one person teaching 45 million people, a classroom size of 45 million to 1? That's going to result in us going from $2 trillion of expense to $200 million of expense, or $2 billion of expense. And what if we actually took all the teachers, right? How many teachers teach geometry to 8th graders in the world? If you are lucky enough to teach geometry to an 8th grader in the world, you have the prospect of teaching the same class every year for 30 years. And maybe teaching the class 5 times a day. 5 times a day, 30 years, right? 30 classes times 5 forever times 100,000 teachers, right? What would you characterize that as if the human race came up with the idea that we're going to pretty much teach the same class 100 million times and not going to learn a single time? If I said to you, do the same thing 100 million times, you'd say, you are insane. And yet that's exactly our best idea to educate the world right now. It's obviously got to go away. It's got to go away. There's going to be kicking and screaming and gnashing of teeth, and unions are going to hate it, and government's going to resist it, and people are going to have 100 reasons why. But at the end of the day, doing the same thing 100 million times redundantly is not going to move the civilization forward. And there was probably somebody that worked on a farm in 1850 that thought, what do I do if I can't walk behind some donkey dragging a plow, you know? And their life is probably better now, or the life of their grandchild is better now. These people that are going to actually stop doing this will hopefully end up researching cures to 100 flavors of cancer and 500 communicable diseases, and inventing a faster-than-light drive, or spaceships, or a better propulsion mechanism, or something useful to us, because teaching algebra the same way we've taught algebra for 2,000 years is not useful to the civilization anymore. These games, which we talk about on mobile devices, I think they're salient because now games actually teach people, in some cases, you can teach people techniques better than a person can. If you can get through 100 levels of cut the rope, you actually probably understand mechanical engineering better than anybody at MIT understands mechanical engineering as an undergraduate. And maybe you could figure that out at age 8. And so inventing a tool which is a simulation of reality, which teaches people better than a person teaches someone, that teaches them for free, that I can give away to 100 million people, is very, very interesting. I think very interesting as a business technique, also very interesting to the civilization in general and to education. And there tends to be, there's this visceral reaction that, oh no, education on a computer is not quite as good as education in a classroom. But that's just an uninformed belief. If you think about learning a foreign language, if I sit on an iPad and I'm wanting to learn French, I can go at my own pace. I can see a video in French. I can hear the French. It'll be perfectly spoken. And I can flip to Greek, Italian, Spanish, whatever I might want. I can do it instantaneously. The likelihood that we're going to be able to put a human being into a classroom that does the same thing is low, but when we do put them in the classroom, there'll be 30 other people in the class, and so I'll get 1/30th of that person's time. Right? What 6-year-old kid is going to get 30 hours a week of instruction in French for free? Right? Well, if you were the 6-year-old kid of a billionaire, you might get your own French tutor. But what we're talking about is a whole set of techniques where the students will actually get instruction as good as a dedicated tutor paid for by their billionaire parents. And even there, it's better, right, because I don't have the person and all the baggage that comes with the person. And so I think that we're going to see people change their view toward software for education over time as these things get more wildly successful. And this is a fascinating slide. It's $1,000 for high school textbooks. It's $600 for an iPad. This is why I think we flipped to an inversion point. It's now cheaper to learn to read on a tablet than it is to learn to read on paper. And if we go through each of these slides, each one of them is in and of itself a justification to flip to using a tablet computer. When you put them all together, it's an overwhelming justification. Then you could say, well, if there are all these overwhelming justifications, why isn't everybody doing it? And the answer is, they're doing it as fast as we can manufacture the glass. And I said this to people. If you look at the business, Jeff Bezos is a guy richer than sin, more money than God, most aggressive business guy of his generation. So aggressive, he would buy up thousands of acres of West Texas to build his own rocket launch facility, to build his own spaceship. That's pretty aggressive. He's in the middle of the book business, and his tablet computer is a Kindle Fire. It's 7-inch form factor. Why is the most brilliant guy with infinite money, with the most to lose in the book business, shipping a 7-inch form factor tablet which can't properly render 90% of all printed materials in the Western world? Not because he's stupid, not because he's lacking money, and not because he's not aggressive. He's shipping a 7-inch tablet either A, because the Android operating system is not stable on a 10-inch form factor, or B, because there is no supply in the world of 10-inch glass. I think it's a combination of both. It may be more likely the second. And my point here is the entire civilization is shifting to this at the rate that they can tool the manufacturing facilities. And so everybody has been lulled into a false sense of security because there's a slow, creeping adoption of tablet computers or iPads is really deluding themselves. it's a fire that's raging, and it's only being constrained by a lack of oxygen, and the oxygen is the components, the radios, the touch screens, the glass that go into the devices. Apple's inventory is like an hour. They have an hour of inventory, right? They're shipping as fast as they can ship. This entire thing is going to turn over as fast as the human race can retool itself, and it's going to do it because nobody in their right mind wants to buy a textbook ever again. Even school systems, governments, they're switching over to tool to this new device. This is a great video. Apple has some good videos. This is a guy teaching anatomy in developing world to a bunch of elementary school kids using an application on an iPad, and it's 100 times better than anything you could have done any time in the history of man. This is going to creep everywhere. $2 trillion already pointed out. At what rate that changes, I don't know, but the money's going to flow somewhere else. This is an interesting anecdote from the book. It's my favorite anecdote. I'm not claiming it's scientific, so I'm not making a scientific judgment about corruption. I am saying one of the reasons that the mobile wave is so powerful, and this is so important, is software isn't corrupt. Software doesn't shake you down for a bribe. Half the students in the Ukraine have to bribe their teachers. Software doesn't call in sick. 25% of all the teachers in India call in sick every day. Software doesn't sexually harass its employees. Software doesn't get distracted because its child is sick. Software isn't obsessed over a bad divorce. Software just does what it does. In this case, the economist hired a guy to drive a truck of Guinness beer through Cameroon, and in 3 days, the guy got stopped 47 times by police, and they stole 1/3 of the cargo with bogus shakedowns. And it's a reminder that in large parts of the world, especially the developed world, if you don't have a rule of law and order, the biggest argument against doing things the conventional way without software is, as long as there are people involved or products involved, when you move the products, the people are going to shake you down, or there's going to be inefficiencies. As long as there are people involved, the inadequacies of the people are going to result in the distress of the consumer or the customer. And so if you're looking at it from a business point of view, the best argument for mobilizing your business or creating mobile apps to provide customer service or to do things that people used to do with people are, if I give you money on your phone and you don't have to go to an ATM, no one can rob you when you walk up to the ATM. Right? And if you don't have to stand in line, you can't get in a fight with someone while standing in line. And if you talk to the computer, you're not going to get mad at the sales rep who looks at you the wrong way. And no sales rep is going to say, my customer came on to me and asked me out on a date. And no store manager is going to say, my boss sexually harassed me, because they're not going to be there, right? If you just obliterate all those expensive services and products, then all the corruption and all the inefficiency of the world goes with it. Now, we can get into a philosophical discussion about whether there should be teachers and store managers or not. But if you're a business person, at the end of the day, if what you want to do is collect $5 billion, the fewer people involved and the less mass and matter involved, the more profitable it's going to be. And in this case, this is actually a great thing, because to the extent that education and medicine and banking services are provided via mobile phone apps off of a cell tower, it's impossible for the 47 policemen to shake you down. They can't stop it. This is a picture I love. I think about that. How many millions and millions of these things did it take to actually get Europe and the United States where they are? Copper's 1,000 times more expensive than mobile networking. And so you just stare at that and you think about how many lives were wasted struggling with that wire, and you say, well, so what good ever came of that? And the answer is maybe a lot of good if we didn't have the technology we have today, but as of today, this year, there's pretty much no good that's going to come of that. So how do you make money? I think the theme here, which is not terribly different than last year, but maybe it's modified by the developments of this year, is it's pretty clear we're staring at a world where in the next 2 years, we've got 5 billion people with smartphones. And so reimagining all your products and services in light of the ability to run that mobile software on their smartphones, I think is a critical thing. And I would say smartphones are really critical, because if there really are 5 billion people with smartphones and there's an application that's a killer app for your industry, you don't roll it out now, you might miss. Because it's going to be one of those things where people are going to say, I don't want it, I don't want it. One person's going to do it. Everyone will then flip to it, and then you're out of business. And we see what happens when the mobile wave hits a given industry. Like when the mobile wave hit RIM, it was kind of like they peaked. The company peaked in market value like 2007, 2008, and they're down 95% in 4 years. So in 36 months or 48 months, you generally fall off a cliff from the peak. Nokia was the most valuable company in Europe 10 years ago, and Nokia may very well just go to zero. And the irony is they'll go to zero over 48 months. So I think generally once the mobile wave hits your industry, if it does, you've got 36 or 48 months, depending upon the nature of your value proposition. So if you own a diamond mine, you own coal factories, or you own an oil well or something like that, you're probably okay. But if you're in a business where the entire product or service can be automated, then you're in deep, deep trouble. And if you're in a business where a portion of the value added is, then you're just going to get squeezed. Like you can predict that a big box retailer is just going to be squeezed every year for the next decade. 3% a year, 2% a year, every year, like water torture. Right? The only way you get around that is you just have to get into a different business that's going to offset the 2 or 3% degradation. Amazon added $25 billion in revenue in 12 months. Which means they basically took it out of Walmart, Best Buy, all the other big players. And so that's like a 2% drip. So that's clear. I think the other point that's fascinating is a lot of companies don't have a mobile connection, but now you can have a mobile connection with your customer. And most businesses probably are still doing business the conventional way. But if you're doing business face-to-face or over the phone, I mean, I think those business models are at risk. And I guess the real big question is, what are the mobile apps to deploy? And I wish I knew the answer. It just seems like the best thing to do is try a number until you figure out which ones will work, which ones won't work. My time's pretty much up, and so I guess I would just leave with a couple of thoughts. In our case, I believe that the really big opportunities that are new and revolutionary are social intelligence, mobile identity, and mobile commerce. And social intelligence is really meaning, why don't you suck every piece of knowledge you can out of the billion people in Facebook, join it with Twitter, link it and cleanse it through Wikipedia and Google, and then tell me what I can know about every brand and every place and every idea and every person on the planet. And our attempt at that, right, our investment in that is wisdom. And we've got a bunch of wisdom products in the product line. It's almost like 4 or 5 different products we've been working on there to do that. Mobile identity, I believe, is critical because there are 1 million organizations that have an ID card. They're all obsolete as of now. Every one of them is 36 months before even the slowest, most dim person realizes they're all obsolete. And mobile identity is at the core of your healthcare card, your loyalty card, your driver's license, your gun permit, your search warrant, your traffic ticket, your prescription, your doctor's credentials, your guest worker permit, your passport, your visa. It's all your bank card. At the core of that is mobile identity, and that leads to digital signature, and that leads to notification and notarization. And so workflow across those 1 million organizations is going to pivot around mobile identity. Whoever establishes mobile identity then has an arm lock that they can use to control how you write a traffic ticket, how you redeem a prescription, and how you get health care, and how you enter the country, how you serve a warrant, and how you retrieve money and send money. So I think that's another big area, and it's almost even more embryonic. Most of the mobile apps out there are kind of silly, playful, cute apps. But at the point that you've got a mobile app on your phone that gets you in the country, gets you out of jail, gets you $1 million out of a bank account, Right? At that point, then those things aren't silly or frivolous anymore. And I can't see it takes more than 36 months for those to take hold in most industries, because they're coming in their viability right now with the advent of Android and iOS. And then the third area is mobile commerce. And by mobile commerce, I just mean if you can make an offer to a mobile device and they can convert that into a voucher. I offer you a ticket. You buy it. It becomes a ticket. Money changes hands. I can move the ticket around. Right, at the point that I have a digital certificate that appears to be valuable, then I can move it around, I can push it down the rails of the social network, I can save it, I can control it, revoke it, enhance it. At that point, then that starts to play with this issue of queuing and all the other inefficiencies. And I would think you'll start to siphon off massive amounts of revenue. And given the fact that most mobile commerce has been enjoined because 2 years ago, all the smartphones were underpowered and the operating systems didn't work, and the tablet computer was non-existent, right? So 2 years ago, you couldn't have. Now we're moving in a world where you've got 1 billion people that have a decent smartphone and 100 million people soon to have a decent tablet computer. We're now about the point where it will work. That means over the next 36 months, mobile commerce presumably is going to become critical, and you're going to see multi-billion-dollar wins in that area. And of course, all these things eventually they impinge on marketing, or they change the nature of what marketing is going to be. But the driver is a better world. And when the dust settles, I think $12 trillion of the economy is going to have dematerialized into network software applications that are more or less elegant. And so I think that's the opportunity. And to Scott's point, it's all about industry, right? If you're in that business, if you're in a business where if you make it work, you're going to operate 1 million times more efficiently than the incumbent, how are you not going to make money? Right? The way I see it is you're in a casino, and you're either playing in a casino where you put down $1 and it pays off 1,000,000 to 1, or you're in a casino where you put down $1 and it pays off $1. Right? And your choice of industry is a function of that. Detroit was a losing industry because there's been no meaningful advance in mechanical engineering and combustion engines in 50 years. And I'm an aerospace engineer. There's no meaningful advance in aerospace engineering in 40 years. The planes we fly around today have engines and wings that aren't that different, maybe different by a factor of 10 or 20% than what we could do in 1970. So if I can only improve my productivity by 10 or 20%, you're in a bureaucratic, tired, old, dull, consolidated industry. You can have a job, but it's just like that government job. You're going to do the same thing over and over again. And these new industries, like the mobile industry, you might very well create something that runs 1 million times better. You might very well create a program. At some point, right, if 1 billion people need to learn basic mathematics, isn't it reasonable that one person might very well teach 1 billion of them? Right? So in the history of the world, no one ever got to teach 1 billion people anything. Right? Now you could do it. Maybe you can make a lot of money being the guy that teaches the 1 billion people something. It's an opportunity. It hasn't been done yet. It's inevitable it will happen. And that's just a question of does it happen in 10 years, 8 years, 4 years, 2 years. It can't be more than 10. It can't be less than 1. And so that's the opportunity. And obviously everybody believes that because that's why you're here. But I appreciate your time, and thanks for listening, and good luck with the conference.
Thank you so much, Mike Saylor, of course, sharing your vision with us. And we'd love to concentrate on a couple of questions like how do we get the energy supply into Africa in order to give the energy to all those mobile applications that are necessary. There's so many other questions that I would love to ask you, but I don't think we do have time right at the moment. But I'm very sure that you've covered almost everything, since everything is changing. Good surfing on the mobile wave. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen,